So as I sort of mentioned before, you might decide that you have a behind the scenes at our company content pillar, content pillar, and if you can then align your blog, your podcast, your social media to basically streamline all of those sort of different types of content, and then post them alongside each other. It saves a lot of time, and it sort of looks very I don't want to say streamlined again because I've said it twice, but it all just looks very flowy. And it sort of looks very, but it all just looks very very flowy. So that's always a good thing. And then just as a side note, with approvals, so yeah, another great thing about using content pillars when you're an agency working for a client is that clients will know what to expect because you have already briefed them on the sorts of content that you're going to be posting, and therefore they're going to be much more in line, and they're going to understand much more about what you're posting because it's very set and it's very consistent. So yeah, they're the sort of great things about using content pillars when you're an agency.
That's really great advice, Ellie, especially on the approvals, because as we all know, the less approvals needed, the less feedback is sent back and forth, the faster we can produce content. So thanks so much for that. Say one of our listeners is very inspired right now and they would like to start using content pillars right away. How would you say they should approach this? What are the steps?
Yeah, so first of all, I would think about your audience, and I think about the sort of content that they want to see. Maybe you could even do a social media audit just to have a look at the kinds of content that work on social, and maybe that you might want to start reproducing on or to scale. And also think about the products and services that you offer, and how they can be translated into social media posts or different sorts of content pillars. And just generally think about your ideal customer persona and what sort of content they want to see and what's useful and relevant to them. So in terms of thinking about your brand's marketing personas, you could think about what your target audience is interested in, and sort of generally how your social media presence can help with your target audience's pain points. Also, in terms of sort of formulating your content pillars, you could carry out some competitor research, and you could look at what your competitors are doing, spot trends in their social presence looks like and what works for them. Because if you're sort of angling towards the same audience, the likelihood is that if it works for them, it will probably work. If it works for them, it will probably work for you as well. So yeah, I think sort of upon creating your content pillars, sort of after doing all of these steps, just really hone in on what your audience is going to want and what's relevant to your audience as opposed to sort of anyone else's. So to be honest, they are all of the steps that we would take here at Sendable when creating content pillars. We looked at what everybody else was doing, thought about how we could sort of be unique, but then also be helpful and be useful. And yeah, I think it's just a really solid way to, as we said before, create consistent content and work out what your audience wants.
Thanks so much for that, Ellie. And how many content pillars should a brand have realistically?
Yeah. So there's a lot of contention, and then there's a lot of different opinions. I mean, some advice will differ, but we would recommend sort of a minimum of 3 content pillars for a smaller brand, and then upwards of even 7 for medium-sized brands. I think what you need to remember is, how big is your team? How big are your pockets? How many resources do you have? And what's realistic for you to sort of keep consistent with? Keep consistent with, because obviously there's no point creating your content pillars if you then deviate from them because you don't have the time to keep producing content. So just really look at your resources and just look at what's relevant to your audience, and maybe don't try and be too ambitious. Start small and sort of scale up as you see success.
So that's 3 to 7 depending on the size of the brand. All right, Ellie, thanks so much for all of that. Good. All right, Ellie, thanks so much for all of that good advice. Let's see how this would work in practice. So me and Ellie have prepared some broad and specific examples of different brands that you can gain inspiration from. And the first example that we have is pretty broad but very coveted, and it's fun consumer products. So Ellie, over to you. What kind of content pillars could you come up with for a fun?
Yeah, so for a fun consumer sort of product, it's the easiest thing to try and market, I think, on social media, because there are so many different ways you can go with it. So a great example would be Sugar Bear vitamins. You see them a lot on Instagram. I think they're a lot on Instagram. A lot on Instagram. I think they're in ads. You will have, I'm sure, scrolled across one before. But they have a brilliant content pillar set. Have a brilliant content pillar setup that's fairly easy to identify when you go grid, especially on Instagram. They have definitely got a user generated content pillar, so screenshots from their people that have bought their product and then are sort of promoting it. That's a great way to build trust. So a really good way to go with content pillar. They also have lots of sort of aspirational posts, beauty goals, that sort of thing. That could be an example of a content pillar. they do beauty tips. That could also be something that could be great. Just in general, sort of any sort of tip-based advice is really good. Carousel posts on Instagram, that people can scroll through. People can scroll through. That's a great thing to go with. Self-care and health advice, particularly sort of mental health advice, that's a really good content pillar for lots of different brands, because it helps to show brand affinity. It helps to show that you're on a level with your consumers, and yeah, sort of promotions, competitions, running a competition to get people to tag you in certain products, or tag themselves and tag their friends or share on their stories. That could be a great way to go for a fun consumer brand. Also behind the scenes content could be really great. Just sort